My name is Terry Batchelor, and I'm a forester with the State of Maryland Department of Natural Resources. And I'm here today on a property in Queen Anne's County with a private licensed forester, Warren Spencer. Warren is a Korean War veteran and a native of Cape May, New Jersey. He graduated from NC State in 1956. He worked for the same office that I worked for the Maryland DNR Forest Service back in the early 60s. For approximately 9 years, he did private forest land management assistance work with the state of Maryland. And in 1965, he went to work for Marvel Packing Company out of Hebron, Maryland, where they made chicken crates and produced baskets, a viable product at that time, utilizing tulip poplar and sweet gum. Later in 1970, Warren had his own sawmill business outside of Dover, Delaware for about 5 years. Later on, he went to work for the Baltimore City Watersheds as a watershed forester, working as an assistant manager for 15 years. Since retiring, he's been a self-employed private consultant forester, and he and his wife live in Queen Anne's County, and he has been practicing private forest management for many years. Warren, can you give us a little bit of background and history of working with this particular landowner from your state to your private world?
Well, your resume made me feel quite old, and it also made me feel like I had a hard time finding my niche in forestry.
Okay.
But anyhow, I have been doing consulting work for quite a bit of time, and on this particular property, we've had a number of timber sales in the past. Incidentally, I haven't been back here since the last timber sale, which was 28 years ago.
Early 80s, yeah, 83.
Early 80s, so for one reason or another, I just haven't been back here. So it's kind of a revelation to see the results of my work. I'm quite satisfied with the number of poplar and sweet gum and pines that are in this young stand.
Can you talk a little bit about the buffer? What do people leave buffers today and that type of thing?
Some people leave buffers and some people don't leave. I prefer to leave buffers because it certainly lessens the aesthetic impact of harvesting. And this day of age when a lot of people are development's going on, and right across the road is a forest, it certainly aesthetically preserves the aesthetics.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, Warren and I commented that we worked together. I was a forester here in '81, and he and I worked together on this project in the early '80s. The 90-acre section was taken and divided into two 45-acre tracts, if I'm roughly guesstimating. And the thought was, with leaving the buffer, that you wouldn't notice at this site was clear cut. He advised the landowner to do it in the two blocks, and I think there was somewhere around 250 to 300,000 board feet per block, done over a period of 2 years. And after the saw log material was removed, we made an attempt to get a fuel wood cutter, and at the time, you commented about the fuel wood crisis, I guess, in the early 80s?
Yeah, that was the time of the first energy crisis, and everybody was putting in wood-burning stoves, and it kind of stimulated the people who wanted to cut wood to make money. So, what was the name of the company that was working in here?
I think Wood and Coal. I mean, it was a name that you would typically think.
Nice name. I think it was only two.
Yeah, Wood and Coal Company.
Two guys that were involved in it, and I know they cut firewood from these properties, but how much I do not know. But,
looking at my records, they did it from 1983 to 1985.
A couple years.
Yeah, significant. I remember quite a little bit of a road system they laid out, and they worked in blocks to utilize much of the material that was left from the tops and the laps and such. And actually, as we walk in from the road section, it almost fools you because you see the 75 to 100 foot buffer of residual beech, gum, maple, little cherry, and then suddenly you see what we're looking around at this point, a mixture of loblolly pine, tulip poplar, with some scattered oak clumps, probably stump sprouts, coming up with 4 at an area. What we did in in analyzing this site is we laid out a plot nearby and tried to look at the coarse woody debris that was left on site. When you're measuring coarse woody debris, a representative from the Pinchot Institute spoke to us and gave us a little insight on what they're looking for. You have to measure 3-inch and larger diameter material in a cross-sectional statistical sample area. Normally you would probably take as many as 20 plots in a section. For informational purposes, when we looked at this site, we actually only took about 2 or 3 plots just as informational purposes, and the thought being that all the woody debris that's left is your natural nutrient and fertilizers for the future. Now when we look around here, just standing here, there's some broken limbs and some slash, but I would say, and do you have any remembrance of what they did utilize from the fuel wood standpoint? Do you remember them using, I mean, I'm thinking over a 2-year time period, they used a significant amount.
I would.
Sampling technique was taken in recent May of 2011. It was determined that right now, the coarse woody debris per acre is about 0.3 tons in a range of 0.3 to 2.2 tons per acre, and we did 4 plot samples. And that's 28 years following a harvest. I think the thoughts is that even though we try to utilize everything that we could, that there's still a significant, a measurable amount of coarse woody debris that of course adds to the future nutrient, fertilization, breakdown. If I understand correctly, most of that comes from the fine woody material, but the decaying leaves and branches and twigs are the significant amount of provisions for the future. So what do you think we should be doing with this site now?
Well, it probably needs a thinning, really. One thing is encouraging when you look at the buffer and the amount of undesirable trees that were in the buffer, and then that you look the results of this harvest, how we've improved on the species composition. So that's very encouraging for the next crop down the road. That's
a very good point, because I've been doing this for almost 33 years. How long have you been practicing forestry?
I've lost track.
50 plus, maybe.
Well,
so,
yes.
But
years ago there were no markets for the undesirable beech, the black gum, and until the pallet industry started to move into this area, and a lot of that material was removed. But over the years, in the past, it was just poplar and oaks taken out of the woods, and the junk stuff was left in here, so I have a lot to deal with.
Would you say that right now today, that if you have some of the lower grade material, that its viable sale is...
It's very movable now,
okay.
Yeah, but we still have to deal with the undesirables in the understory that generally take over the site on a selective cutting basis. So, and because this was clear cut, the poplar and the pine had the greater chance to take over the site, which it did, and it looks real good.
It does look good, considering the things that needed full sunlight were able to sustain.
Right.
But ideally, if we could get thinning, Warren and I have both discussed how that's probably the most difficult thing, to be able to get an active thinning, the final harvest for the merchantable material. But that's why in some cases there are parts of the United States where they come in and take all this, even at this age, from the biomass standpoint. Right. But probably our thoughts would be to do some type of a thinning if there's any way we possibly could.
Yeah.
So. Okay. Well, thank you, Warren, for giving us your insight. Appreciate it.
It's nice to see the results of your work.
Yes,
30 years down the road, or 50 years down the road.
Yeah,
so.
thank you very much.
Thanks for having me down here.
Thank you.